Is it time to worry about Davante Adams in fantasy football? That's what we're going to explore in today's video. But first, if you could please like the video and subscribe to the channel. We are trying to get to 250 subscribers by the time training camp starts. Now it's June 24th, Saturday, so we have about a month or so left. We're at 213, so we're looking to get about 37 more subscribers in the next month. We would greatly appreciate it. Also, leave a comment below. Are you worried about Davante Adams? Are you fading him? Are you avoiding him in your fantasy drafts? So I've been hearing a lot lately about Davante Adams, and this is the time of year. There's not a whole lot of information in fantasy football, and if you listen to fantasy football podcasts and shows and YouTube shows, they got to fill in this kind of empty space. There's not much news. And so one of the ways they do it, they talk about sleepers, they talk about value picks, they talk about busts and guys to avoid. And I listen to a lot of different shows and podcasts and YouTube channels, and I've been hearing on quite a few of them about Davante Adams. It's time to be worried about Davante Adams, that we should maybe start to fade Davante Adams, or he could be a bust. And so me being the nerd that I am, decided to kind of look into this a little bit more and really see, is it really time to start fading Davante Adams? Should we avoid him in the late first or second round completely and just go somewhere else? And so I decided to do the research. Like I said, I'm a nerd, and this is what I do. So one of the things I've been hearing about Davante Adams is age, okay? He's getting to that age. He's 30 years old. He'll be 30 basically the entire 2023 season. He turns 31 December 24th. So what is that? Week 15? Week 15, 16, probably week 16, right? I would say. Essentially at the end of the year, he turns 31. So he's going to be 30 basically the entire year. And yes, of course, just like with running backs, and we talked about it in a running back age video, there is a number where you see a big drop off of guys finishing in the top 10 or top 20. For running backs, it's after the age of 28. For receivers, it's after the age of, it's the ages of 30, 31 where you start to see that drop off. And this is true. You can't deny that. Now, there's, I think, a lot more factors playing into it rather than just simply, you're 30, you're trash, right? I think a lot of teams, if they're going to choose, they're probably going to go with a younger guy over an older guy unless you're special, right? And there's just not that many special receivers. There really aren't. I'm talking about high caliber, consistently top 5 guys. If you've been just kind of a guy, a top 24 receiver, a receiver that averages 900 yards, even during your prime years, maybe 1,000 yards during your prime years, teams are probably not going to really want to sign you when you're 30, 31 because in your prime, you weren't this elite guy. So they're not going to really expect you to be an elite guy when you're 30, 31. They'll go with the younger guy. Most teams, it should be like 80% of teams should be realistic and probably there's about 20% of teams every year that can compete to win a Super Bowl. And those are all those other teams. If you're a team like the Houston Texans, I know they brought in like a guy like Robert Woods, but it's like, do you really want to be putting a lot of money into a 30-year-old guy? So anyways, there's a lot of factors for age rather than just the age and the number itself. So the first thing I decided to look at was like, okay, Davante Adams, he'll be 30 this year. That's definitely a drop off for receivers. So I decided to go back 10 years and look at receivers since 2013. Let me change my format here so you can see a little better. Receivers since 2013, between 2013 and 2022. So that is 10 years of data and information. Wide receivers that were 30 or more or older during the season that put up top 20 fantasy football seasons at the wide receiver position. Now, I know with Davante Adams, if he finishes, if he finishes wide receiver 15 or lower, we're kind of disappointed in that. So I understand, not being satisfied with a wide receiver 17 finish. But even then, I highlighted all the guys that finished in the top 10. So we have 23 receivers that have been 30 or older that have finished in the top 20 in PPR leagues in fantasy football. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 of those 23 actually finished in the top 10. And you look at some of the names: Andre Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald, Calvin Johnson, Jordy Nelson, another Larry Fitzgerald, Antonio Brown, Julio Jones. Keenan Allen, DeAndre Hopkins, a little skewed because they didn't play the whole year, but when they did last year, they were kind of top guys. These are all, except for maybe Julian Edelman, who was not consistently a top 10, top 5 guy. He was more like maybe a top 15, top 24 guy. Other than Julian Edelman, all these other guys, the Andre Johnsons, the Larry Fitzgeralds, the Megatrons, these guys were legit receivers. Some of the, maybe at one point, the best in the league. Definitely some of the best in the league. Even Jordy Nelson had a 2-3 year stretch where he was one of the best in the league. So that, when we think about Davante Adams, who's been maybe the best receiver since 2018, if you're taking into account from 2018 to 2022, it's hard to find anyone else besides Davante Adams. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, they didn't play since 2018. Cooper Kupp, he's been, he had his huge, 2021 season. But before that, he had some good seasons, but not Davante Adams-like seasons. So Davante Adams falls into this category of, could easily be a top 10 wide receiver, even a top 5 wide receiver, even though he's 30 years old, in my opinion. So you've seen 10 guys, basically one guy over each per year, essentially, it averages out to, that's 30 or older, that can finish in the top 10. I think that could be Davante Adams this year. I don't know if you think there's going to be someone else, maybe a Keenan Allen, but I think it could be Davante Adams. So the age thing, yeah, for Dynasty, it's something to think about. But for this year in redraft football, I'm not too worried about Davante Adams. He's 30. He's kind of a youngish 30. He's going to be 30 basically the whole year. You see some guys 32 years old, 32, 31, 34 years old. Like, you see some guys that are significantly older than 30 putting up top 10 seasons. He is basically 30 the entire year. So he's at the young end of this cliff, so to speak. So that's one of the things I hear about Davante Adams, and I'm just kind of pushing that to the side, at least for 2023. The other thing I hear about is Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo is your quarterback. And Jimmy Garoppolo is known for not throwing deep, right? That's just the fact of the matter, is that Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't throw the ball deep. And it's really hard to deny that. You can't argue against that. I'm not going to argue against that because it's true. He doesn't. We look at Carr last year. I'm going to show you some numbers here. Derek Carr last year, 71 passes of 20 plus yards downfield, right? The ball was in the air for 20 or more yards. He had 71 of those. That was tied for 7th most, and he missed a couple games. He was benched. 2021, now, I went back and said, well, is that just because Davante Adams? We can make the argument, well, Garoppolo has Davante Adams, he'll throw deep more. Not really, because 2021, 81 passes of 20 yards or more down the field, that was 4th most. So in 2021, and even in 2020, he was, 60 is pretty significant, tied for 15th most. So it wasn't just Davante Adams is the reason why Derek Carr started to throw deep more. Okay, so then we look at Garoppolo. Is it true Garoppolo doesn't throw deep? Well, let's see. Jimmy Garoppolo, in 2020, he had 28 passes of 20-plus yards downfield. Now, he did miss, 6-7 games? It would have been 48 in a full season, which would have been 20th best. So a pretty big drop-off from 71 to, that's 23 less passes down the field, right? 2021, I think Garoppolo played the whole year, 33 passes, 29th most. 2019, he basically played the whole year, 31 passes. So Garoppolo, it is true, doesn't throw deep. So does that mean, well, Davante Adams, he's going to suck? So then I decided to look at, well, let's look at Davante Adams. He's basically been, since 2018, when he's played a full year, which is, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 5 years since 2018. He's played basically a full season. 4 of those 5 years, he's been a top 3 receiver in half PPR. The 1 year, I think it was 2019, where he missed 4 or 5 games. I think he was 6th in average. So he would have been wide receiver 6 had he played the whole year. So basically, we have 5 years of Davante Adams. I decided to go back and look at, has Davante Adams always been kind of a deep threat guy? And we look here, of course, 2022, we just talked about it with Derek Carr being seventh most in passes downfield. Davante Adams was tied for first. Okay. 2021, pretty significant drop off. He had 25 targets of 20 or more yards down the field, which was 11th. Still really good. 2020, Davante Adams, again, in 2020, Davante Adams was wide receiver. Give me a second to pull it up. He was definitely in the top 3. Davante Adams in half PPR, which is normally what I play, was wide receiver 1. Okay. In full PPR, he was wide receiver 1. He had 20 targets, just 20 targets of 20 or yards or more down the field. That was tied for 26th best for receivers. Just 20 targets. That's not a whole lot. That's a pretty significant drop off. 18 targets less than what he had in 2022. He was still wide receiver 1. 2019, now he only played in 12 games, 22 targets. Okay, he probably would have been closer to 30-ish. 2018, he had 34 targets. So we've kind of seen best of both worlds for Davante Adams. We've seen him be near the top in a couple years, and he's still a top 5 wide receiver. We've seen him be, more middle of the pack, I'd say, in 2021 and 2019. Still was a top 3 receiver. 2020, we've seen him more kind of on the lower end. Not super low, but 26 is not very high. And he was wide receiver 1. Could I see Davante Adams get 20 targets of 20 or more yards down the field with Jimmy Garoppolo? Yeah. Look at Garoppolo's numbers. He goes over 30 about, right? Last year he was on pace for 48. So if you tell me if he throws, let's just say 40 passes down the field, half of those going to Davante Adams, I'd probably say so, just thinking about the Raiders and who they have on the team. Hunter Renfrow, Jacoby Myers, those guys aren't deep guys. The tight end is not going to account for many of those. It's probably going to be Davante Adams being targeted at least half the time down the field. And to kind of further hammer this point through or down or whatever the expression is, hammer this point, there's some kind of expression. To kind of really just bring this point home. I looked at some wide receivers finishing in the top 12 and, kind of looking at some wide receivers who weren't near the top of being targeted down the field a lot. Of course, if you're targeted consistently down the field, there's a good chance you're going to be, a good wide receiver, a good fantasy wide receiver. But we look at 2022, 6 of the top 12, exactly half of the guys finishing in the top 12 in half PPR, they weren't really targeted downfield. Jalen Waddle had the 37th most targets, 20 yards or more down the field. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 81st. Amari Cooper, 16th, kind of middle of the pack. Devontae Smith, middle of the pack-ish. Wide receiver 10. Same with Christian Kirk. Even Jamar Chase. He wasn't really targeted as much downfield as he was in his rookie year, 36th most. I can see Devontae Adams being right in here, being between 16 and 25th most targeted receiver down the field. 2021, 4 of the top 12, so a little less than 2022, but wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 were 17th and 45th in targets down the field. And then Deontay Johnson and Hunter Renfrow, 15th and 89th. And Deebo Samuel is an interesting one, obviously, because who was throwing him the ball? It was Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, I know Deebo Samuel, if you take away his rushing, he's probably, I think, like wide receiver 9 or something, 8 or 9 that year. And Davante Adams, I don't even know if he has many rushes in his career. I think I remember seeing, he has 3 rushes in his career, and that were all last year. So he's not going to rush the ball. But still, Deebo Samuel still put up over 1,400 yards that year. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is I don't think I'm too worried about Davante Adams. Now, if you were to tell me Jimmy Garoppolo is hurt, and I think Brian Hoyer is the wide receiver, the quarterback 2 there, and if you were to tell me Brian Hoyer is the quarterback, now I'm going to start being slightly worried. But I think I'm still going to buy Davante Adams at his dip because he's definitely going to dip if Brian Hoyer is the guy. But I think Davante Adams is just one of those receivers. He can beat you being a deep threat. He could beat you by catching 12 passes. We saw it last year. Everyone was kind of slightly worried about Davante Adams. It's like, well, he's not with Aaron Rodgers anymore. Oh, he's with Derek Carr. We're worried about Davante Adams going to Derek Carr. Guess what? Davante Adams had the second most receiving yards in his career and the second most touchdowns and still caught 100 passes last year. So he kind of proved us that it wasn't just Aaron Rodgers making Davante Adams good. And even one game with Jarrett Stidham at quarterback when Derek Carr, one of those games where actually there was two games where Carr didn't play, and he played with Davante Adams played with Jarrett Stidham. In 2 weeks, guess what he had? He had over 220, almost 230 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 12 catches in 2 weeks. Those are really, really good numbers. If you're averaging 115 yards a game and 6 catches and a touchdown, that's insane numbers. So even with Jarrett Stidham, Davante Adams was still a stud. So I'm really, really just not worried about him. I guess that's what this video was. I've just been hearing a lot of Davante Adams, you got to fade him, you got to worry about him. He's a bust candidate for those second-round picks. And I'm still going to buy in. I hope he keeps slipping, to be honest. And the last thing I'll show you guys here is Davante Adams, according to NFFC Draft Trends, good website to kind of look at ADP. You can put it in different ranges from the last month to the beginning of the year. And basically what we're seeing with Davante Adams, we see a downward trend. We are seeing a downward trend for Davante Adams. Basically at the beginning of the year, after the Super Bowl. Now, again, these are best ball drafts and things like that. Like, these aren't the most accurate drafts, but it's all we kind of have right now when it's June 24th because not a lot of people are doing their fantasy drafts. But anyways, Davante Adams was like a top 5 player, it looks like, or no, like a top 8, 9 player, right? And I think I remember looking at it, and I think he was wide receiver like 5 at the beginning of the year. And he's just been slowly going down. So at the point now that he's gone from kind of like a mid to late first rounder to like a mid second rounder. Now, still, he's a second round pick, right? People aren't fading him to the 4th round or whatever, but it is going down. We've seen, I think this low number here is as low as 22. So you're getting him at basically the end of the 2nd round. And just think about that. Think about if you could start your draft with like McCaffrey or Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase and then get Davante Adams. That's insane if you can get McCaffrey and Adams or Chase and Adams or Jefferson and Adams. That's what, if he goes 22nd overall, that's a realistic possibility. You're winning your league most likely if that happens. So we just see this downward trend to where he's below, he's going around pick 16 now. I think he's wide receiver 9. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown has now moved ahead of him. And I like all the guys that are going in front of him. I like Jefferson. I like Chase. I like Cooper Kupp. I like CeeDee Lamb. I like A.J. Brown. But I also like Davante Adams. And I really do hope he keeps dropping because I am going to buy the dip on Davante Adams. I don't think he'll drop out of the 2nd round unless, the Raiders are going to start with Brian Hoyer at quarterback. I don't think he'll drop out of the 2nd round, but if I can get him in the late 2nd, I am super, super happy about that. So there you have it, guys. I just wanted to look at Davante Adams a little bit and kind of give you my point of view. I think a lot of people, again, just throwing out he's getting old. Well, he has Jimmy Garoppolo and not really like diving into the numbers. So I really wanted to kind of dive into it a little bit with you guys and just kind of show you hey, Davante Adams, there's still a really good chance he's a legit Hall of Fame receiver, best receiver since 2018, had maybe his 2nd or 3rd best year of his career last year, even though he was 29, 30 years old. I'm not worried about him, and I really don't think at this point you should be. So there you have it, guys. We'll be doing more videos about this, looking at some trends going on in the fantasy world, looking at some specific players. Appreciate it if you stayed to watch. If you could, again, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and again, leave a comment down below and just tell me, are you worried about Davante Adams? Where would you be comfortable taking him? Late 1st, mid 2nd, Are you going to kind of avoid him altogether in the second round and hopefully he falls to the third? Let me know in the comments